You've probably heard of Deepak Chopra, right? He's a global spiritual figure really known for blending ancient Eastern wisdom with the language of modern science. And his ideas, they've inspired millions. But how solid is the foundation they're actually built on? In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct a detailed critique of Chopra's work. We'll look at his use of science, the logic behind his arguments, and whether his philosophy really holds together.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to lay out Chopra's core philosophy, just so we're all on the same page. Then, we'll dive straight into a three-part critique from our source, looking at how science gets used, whether the arguments are logically sound, and if some of the ideas might even contradict each other. And we'll wrap it all up by exploring the psychology of why these concepts can be so powerful for so many people.
All right, first things first. Before we can really dig into the critique, we've got to understand the foundation. The analysis we're drawing from argues that Chopra's philosophy isn't exactly brand new. It's more like a modern repackaging of some very ancient ideas, specifically from the Hindu school of Advaita Vedanta, that have been relabeled with scientific-sounding language to really connect with a modern audience.
So what does this philosophy actually look like? Well, the source we're looking at boils it down to a few key ideas. It all starts with this: consciousness is the ultimate reality. From there, you get the idea that humans are inherently divine. Then there's the concept that the physical world we see, all this separation, is actually an illusion. Now, these ancient ideas are bridged to our world today using what's often called quantum mysticism, and that leads to the final and most powerful claim: you can create your own reality with your mind.
Okay, so now we get to the first major piece of the critique from our source material, the claim that scientific concepts are being misused, maybe even misapplied, to give weight to spiritual ideas. Let's see exactly how this analysis breaks that down.
This is the big one, right? This idea is totally central to the appeal, the promise that you can manifest your desires just by focusing on them. But our source argues that this entire concept is actually built on a fundamental misreading of a key scientific principle. Let's dig into that. And here we go. This is the core of the scientific critique. It focuses on the observer effect. Now, in actual quantum physics, this just means that the act of measuring a tiny particle with an instrument changes its state. It's a technical thing. But the critique points out that this specific principle is then reinterpreted to mean something way, way bigger, that your consciousness, just by thinking or observing, can shape physical reality. It's a huge leap from a lab instrument interacting with a particle to your mind creating the universe.
And according to the source, this isn't just a one-off thing. It highlights a pattern. Field theory gets reimagined as a universal consciousness field. Epigenetics gets simplified to mean your positive thoughts can directly alter your genes. And quantum entanglement is used as this beautiful metaphor for how we're all spiritually connected. The core argument here is that the language of science is being borrowed to give a kind of authority to ideas that science itself doesn't actually support.
All right, so critique number 1 was all about the misuse of scientific words. Now, critique number 2 shifts gears a bit and looks at the structure of the arguments themselves. It's asking a simple question: do the conclusions actually follow from the evidence presented?
To really get this next part, we need to know one key term. It sounds fancy, but it's simple: a non sequitur. It's a Latin phrase that literally just means it does not follow. It's when you present a conclusion that isn't really supported by the premise you just gave. It's a gap, a jump in the argument's logic.
So, our source gives us a perfect example of how this supposedly works. Check this out. It starts with a real scientific fact. Quantum particles are uncertain. Okay, fine. But then comes the first jump. Therefore, physical reality is uncertain. And from there, it's an even bigger leap to the grand conclusion: therefore, my thoughts can shape reality. The critique argues that each step, each therefore, is a non sequitur. It's a jump across a logical gap that isn't really connected.
And that brings us to the third and final major critique from the source: internal coherence. The question here is pretty straightforward. Do all these core ideas actually fit together and work in harmony, or do they kind of clash with each other?
The analysis points out what it sees as a major contradiction. On one side, you have this idea of self-dissolution. The classic spiritual goal of letting go of your ego, your personal desires. But on the other side, you have this powerful message of self-empowerment, using your personal desires and intentions to manifest your goals. So the critique asks, which is it? Are you trying to get rid of yourself, or are you trying to empower it? Because logically, it's pretty tough to do both at the same time.
And there's another one, this time about reality itself. One minute, the teaching is that the physical world is an illusion, Maya. It's not the real reality. But then, the very next minute, a central promise is that you can manifest very real, tangible results in that world. Better health, more wealth. So the question posed by the critique is, if the material world is just an illusion, why is a primary spiritual goal to improve your situation inside that illusion?
Okay, so we've walked through the critiques from the source, looking at the science, the logic, and the internal consistency. And that leads to a really big question, right? If these arguments have some validity, then why are these ideas so incredibly popular? For that, the final part of the analysis turns to psychology.
Yeah, let's just lay it right on the table. If these critiques hold water, what is it that makes this blend of ideas so compelling, so resonant for millions of people all over the globe? Well, the source we're examining suggests the answer might have less to do with the evidence and more to do with us, with how our own minds are wired.
The analysis suggests that we're kind of primed to accept these ideas because of some very common mental shortcuts, what psychologists call cognitive biases. For example, there's confirmation bias. We just love ideas that already fit what we want to believe. Then there's authority bias. If someone with a doctor title says it and uses sciencey words, we're more likely to just trust it. Wishful thinking is a huge one. I mean, who doesn't want to believe they have the power to create their own reality? The analysis also mentions the halo effect, where charisma can make someone seem more credible. And the bandwagon effect. If everyone's talking about it, it must be true, right? You put that all together, and it's a really powerful recipe for belief.
And so we're left with this final, really thought-provoking question, which kind of gets to the heart of this whole analysis. When does inspiration cross the line and become misinformation? It's a tricky one. It really makes you think about that fuzzy line between a philosophy that uplifts us and makes us feel empowered, and one that maybe stretches scientific principles way beyond their breaking point. And really, the crucial takeaway here is to just ask yourself, where do you draw that line?